So let's skip these few slides and go straight into the question. So the question I want you to ask yourselves in your organization is, who's got access, what have they got access to, and what can they do with that access in your organization? And I've got 3 key messages today. One for the auditors, one for the guys who sit in the business and the technology decision makers, and one for the vendors and the SIs. So let me talk you through this. So the organizations that you see on the screen today, starting from Barings Bank, right through to Société Générale, have got something in common. They thought they understood the inside threat. They thought they had a very good handle on user access management. They thought that they had the right processes and procedures in place and the tools. But as you can see, each of them lost a significant amount of money, reputation, and data during these periods of time. In fact, UBS got hit twice. A couple of years ago, they got hit again for a couple of billion as well. But this was about money. Somebody mentioned yesterday about data and Snowden, WikiLeaks. It's a very common occurrence, certainly within the organizations now. So the problem exists. So what were the findings? There was a very common root cause problem across all of the cases that you see here. And here's a summary of them, and I'll highlight some of the key ones. The first one being privileged access, and we talked about it earlier. People who sit within the organization who've got access, who've got privileged access, and we don't know what they do with that access, and this is normally the technology people. We then have problems with our processes. So the key problem here is people moving through the organization. The reason why Société Générale lost the money they did was because they had a trader who started off working in the back office. He worked his way through to the middle office and then to the front office. What he found was that he could actually make the trades and settle the trades. And as he went through the organization and he worked there for a period of 5 to 7 years, nobody ever thought about checking to see what was his previous role, what role is he coming into, what do I need to take away from him, what does he really need to do his job, and what does he need in his new role. This is probably one of the most difficult issues facing a lot of organizations, and that is people moving around the organization, being able to remove access and give them the appropriate access, managing their risk within an organization. And a lot of organizations just don't even know how to start with this problem. The last one is the users, the business themselves. They have users who need access to applications. They don't actually understand what those applications do because they're not in English, they're not in plain English. They're actually in technology speak. There could be numbers. Certainly from working from a banking background and working in the investment bank, a lot of the applications are numbers. So a manager would receive a request and say, can you approve access to 124 Siebel or something? And he'd say, great, go ahead and do that. But he doesn't understand what he can do with that access. So those threats can be compounded into 4 different areas. This is what we find every time in every organization. The first one is orphan accounts. People leaving the organization. Those accounts don't get removed. The request gets raised for them to be removed, but they're actually in the underlying systems. They don't get removed by the old provisioning systems. The second one is rogue accounts, and this is where people inside the organization actually deliberately go and create these accounts, and they create those accounts for a reason, to be malicious and to hide things and do things. The third one is entitlement creep, and this is what we were talking about earlier about Société Générale and UBS. Somebody being able to move around the organization, accumulating these privileges, and then becoming toxic, them really understanding what they can do within the organization. And the last one is privileged users. You know, who's monitoring the privileged users? Nobody. Gartner decided 5, 6 years ago that this was an area of key interest to them. So they actually went out and did a survey. And as you can see, if I average those out and if you look at the questions, how many failed an IT security audit, how many CIOs can tell you how many privileges there are in their organization, who can give me a list of who's got access, what have they got access to, 50% of the organizations failed. And that's the reason why identity access governance was put on the roadmap. And it's become a big industry. As you can see now, it's a very mature market. There are multiple players in the marketplace doing a lot of things. in this space around provisioning and around governance. And it's certainly something that's a wave that's been accepted throughout the US and Asia, as you can see in my next slide. The regulators picked up on this, certainly when people started to lose money. And if you look at the US, they implemented regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley, SAS 70. In Japan, they had JSOX and other regulations. But you see, us in the Middle East, there's nothing. There are no regulations. So my message to the auditors is, when you go and do those audits and you identify those deficiencies, we know they get written in audit reports. We know they're flagged up to the CIOs. But who's talking to the regulators? We need to do a better job. We need to get them around the table, and we need them to realize that this is a very important topic. And they need to pay attention. Now, we can't do that without your help. So we need you to go out there and educate the regulators. Something certainly needed in the MEA region. It's long overdue. So what is it? What's the ideal world? I want to move into how we need to control this now. So I've got 3 different pieces. The first piece is requesting access. So typically what happens is you pick up the phone, or it's a spreadsheet, you submit a request, and it goes to a person and he actually requests the access for you. There's no validation that's been done. A lot of the tools that are in the marketplace now will actually have a compliance piece in the first module in request access. So before you as a user, as a manager, request that access, it can go off and it can check a number of policies and actually confirm, should this person have access to this role or to this entitlement? Is this a privileged account? And if there's any conflict, it'll take it away, or remove it, or it'll say, sorry, you're not allowed to have that access, go away, try again. The second piece is validating access. We need to do a big cleanup in our organizations. We need to take away those 4 areas that we talked about earlier around orphan accounts and privileged accounts and so on. And that's what validating access means. Taking a lot of that stuff away, cleaning out your data, and allowing things to happen, which is the third cog, which is make account, which is provisioning. And that is when somebody does leave, somebody does move, or somebody joins, they get automated access. So they get access straight away, and it gets removed straight away. Industry best practices, Big Bang doesn't really work, not in identity governance. That's why we saw so many of the provisioning projects in the last 10 to 15 years fail, because everybody tried to do everything at once. If I was to break it down, and this is what we tell all our clients, is first of all, get compliant. Get your data clean, have a baseline, really understand the state of the data and people within your organization. Number 2, think about your roles, think about policies, think about the risks in your organization. Talk to the business, because this is a 50-50 partnership between technology and the business. Technology can't deliver this, they're the facilitators. The business really understand their users. It's got to be a marriage. So really define those policies and risks, because that's what you're going to measure yourself again. That's your baseline. Moving into looking at your business processes. Let's look at password management, see if we can enhance the user experience, productivity, efficiency, and so on. And finally, the dreaded word is provisioning. We know it's expensive. Look at your critical applications. You don't have to provision all your applications. But identify the ones that are critical and important to your business, and automate those at least. This is the vision that you should be working towards. And if you look in the center here, we have something which is called the IAM warehouse. And what that really is, it's bringing all the data into one place. This is your entitlement store. At the moment, what we find is organizations, and I apologize for this, it keeps changing, have disparate systems, multiple systems with information everywhere. You need to bring all that information in one place. And only then can you really apply the roles and the policies to the decisions that you're going to make. Your requesting, your provisioning, your compliance, everything in one place. And when I look at compliance, risk, again, plays a very important role. You could risk profile your users, you could risk profile your applications. You can do this in so many different ways. There are so many techniques and processes and tools that allow you to do this. But we fail to do that. Segregation of duties. Very key, very important. Again, not a lot of importance played in this part of the world. But when I look at some of the clients that we worked with around the world, this is the key driver. When I sit with the CIOs, this is the question they always ask me. What are we doing with our segregation of duties? What did you find when you spoke to my audit teams and my business? Segregation of duties. The future of identity, I mean, it's playing such an important role. Now we're starting to see some SIM solutions, so security event monitoring tools, who take the data from identity access governance tools and processes, and they're actually started to use that and start to move towards identity-based SIM solutions. And you'll see this noise now over the next 2-3 years, where they're starting to move away from it being with no context to being able to identify users in the organizations that are actually impacting them. And finally, oops, I think I've lost it. That's okay, I'll talk through it. And finally, using techniques like profiling. So if you've got identity governance, if you understand your users, if you understand their roles, it's very easy for you to take that data that we were talking about and say, I've got somebody who's a bank teller. I've profiled him. However, he sits outside as an outlier. Why is it that I've got 59 tellers who've got these entitlements and these roles, but I've got 2 who sit outside and I've got access to other systems? It's very easy for us to do that. But this is a journey, it is a roadmap to get there. But like I said, there's a lot of techniques that we need to think about as to how we can do that, and finding out those outliers, because those are the guys who we really need to look out for. How do you select your tool? So this message is for those decision makers. These are the kind of things you really need to look for. Gartner, a big believer of Gartner. I think a lot of work that they do here, and a lot of the analyst work that the analysts do, really does matter. And I think before you buy any tool, you should definitely go out and reach out to Gartner as to what the recommendations are and who the key players are. To really understand what the market is doing, what the players are doing, who are they merging with, which are the ones to really kind of shortlist for your RFPs. The second one is a strong referenceable customer base. A lot of vendors out there who've done some deployments, they're in pilots, but they can't scale, or they haven't got good, strong references because it hasn't been in operation. Just because they've sold a solution doesn't mean it was successful. You really need to sit with the references and say, have you had this in operation for 1 year? Have you managed it in earnest? Have you used all the bells and whistles that come with this tool? What's your experience? And you really only get that after 15 months or 18 months and so on, because that's when you really understand the pain of actually implementing these solutions. And what you'll find is 50% of the tools that are out there, they will turn around and say, after a year, no, I wish we could get rid of it, or I wish we hadn't purchased it. So when you do make decisions, don't just take it to face value that somebody sold something to somebody and it's going through a pilot, or it's within the first 12 months. Look beyond that. Everything you do around this space has got to be around roadmap and strategy. It's a 2 to 3 year journey. And when you purchase those tools, don't think about, this is going to solve my immediate problem, it's cheap, that's all I need. Wrong way to do things. Look at your 3 year roadmap, look at your return on investment, look for tools which can provide you with functionality or tools that are leading the marketplace, because those are the guys, when they start developing that new technology, they're going to start investing in it, and you're going to see the returns. So let it be a bit more expensive to start, but as you go through that journey, you're going to find that you're going to make those savings from the tool. And my third message, and this is to the vendors and SI, is I love this statement. It says, as a security and risk leader, if you have only $1 to spend, spend on identity governance, which means you guys are in the money. This industry is a $5 billion industry, and within 3 years, it's going to 10. So it's the right place to be. Thank you.